From the WKYT studios in Lexington, this is Kentucky Newsmakers with Bill Bryant.
Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, hoping you're having a nice weekend. Later, we'll talk about why your property tax bill is what it is. Fayette County's Commonwealth, the property valuation administrator, will talk to us about how values are determined and why some neighborhoods see more increases than others, while values go down in some areas. PVA David O'Neill joining us shortly. But first, Lexington is weeks away from starting a needle exchange program where drug addicts can trade in used needles for clean ones. The state legislature gave health departments the local option to set up those exchanges. We'll talk about Fayette County's public health with Dr. Rice Leach, who is the director of the health department this morning. Also, a new report showing Lexington has room for improvement in several health categories. And a military study recently saying that obesity is keeping lots of young people from being fit enough to serve our country as soldiers. Dr. Leach, also a former state health commissioner, he's joining us today. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it very much. Well, where is Lexington in terms of setting up a needle exchange?
We expect to be online by Labor Day or the day after, one or the other. Where are we? We are in the course of planning. We are going to require people to bring in used needles to get needles back. There's been some talk about 1 for 1. Well, we're going to start with, you better bring something in and we'll give you something back. The experience has shown that once you get these things going and people have confidence that nobody's going to mess with them, for the patients, for coming in just with needles, you get a very good return on that. Well, and there's a reason for it. Stop communicable disease with those needles lying around.
Sure, and we'll talk about that. But why, the reason you point out 1 for 1, there's been controversy in Louisville where they handed out at one point like 1,700 needles and there were 300 that were turned in. And some members of the legislature say that is not 1 for 1, that you have created a public dispensary of needles.
Well, that's Louisville's problem. We realize that if you give 1 for 1, so they come in once a month, they use that needle over and over again. And I was told by some of the people we interviewed at the jail that are drug abusers, people will sharpen that thing and they get shared. So the idea of giving them enough to have a clean needle every day makes sense, but it also makes sense to say, bring them back, guys. We had a call from one local agency wanting to know if we would take needles right now that they've found. And I said, sure, bring them in, because our job is public health. And I don't care who's picking them up, it helps. And so we got to have some kind of exchange. The law said exchange. It didn't specify. And I'm personally concerned that if the counties don't bring them in, then the legislators will put a number on the law next session, and that will just take away an awful lot of flexibility. So we're going to have people bring them in.
As to the benefits, what does it do?
Well, the needle exchange, from my point of view, is to prevent the spread of hepatitis B, which costs about $50,000 a case to treat, hepatitis C, which costs around $90 grand to treat, and AIDS, which costs anywhere between $500,000 and $800,000 for every case. So there's an economic side of it, but the main thing is it stops the spread of these diseases through needles. Every one of those diseases I mentioned can be caught by unprotected sex. So anybody that has sexual relations with more than one partner is at some risk of catching this disease from the drug abuser to a sex partner to somebody else. So there's a very good public health reason for shutting down as much as we can the spread of this disease as caused by needles being shared.
We've had some pretty alarming examples fairly close by, right?
Well, that's Indiana, but what people don't realize is here in Kentucky, our rates of hepatitis B and hepatitis C have nearly doubled in the last 5 years. And that's needles has got to be a major contributor to that.
All right, you said we're going to set up a program where we won't mess with them. In other words, they feel comfortable coming in. But isn't the purpose in part, Dr. Leach, to be able to get them into, at least into the system where you can give them some guidance?
Oh yeah, we're going to do consultation, offer it if the clients want it. We're preparing information on how to avoid catching these diseases from needles. We're working with relationships with the medical world to take care of the diseases and the drug abuse side. getting the people into treatment for their drug abuse is a bigger issue because the demand exceeds the supply pretty much right now. But we have to get started.
Where have we gone wrong? You know, we see reports that the heroin epidemic is not slowing down at this point. Some are getting addicted to the drugs that are designed to help people get off drugs, the Suboxone and so forth. Do we have an effective strategy in place in Kentucky to deal with illicit drugs, and specifically at this point heroin?
I'm not aware of a detailed strategy, but that's because that's not exactly where I work. You and I have talked about this before. Drug abuse, homicide, suicide, abuse in general are major public health issues. And I think by bringing the public health world into this, some of the public health techniques of finding out where it is, finding out who it is, and then looking for ways to intervene will certainly help stop the spread of the communicable diseases. But the bigger issue is the one you raised. Why do they get started? And in talking to this handful of drug addicts that we spoke to out at the Lexington jail, some of them say the stuff is cheap, and they'll give it to you just to make you feel good. Well, one young woman wrote a poem, 2 doses of this stuff, and she was hooked for life. So if you're in business to sell this illegal material, and you can get people hooked by just giving them 2 doses to require them to spend a lifetime until they get into treatment, it's a heck of a marketing technique. It's not a good one. I don't like it. But that's one way it happens. And then I don't know all the reasons, but we will, I'm sure, in talking to people who use these drugs, get a better feel for how did you get in it and how can we help prevent that. And every one of them we talk to says anything you can do to help people not get in this mess is a great thing.
You are the Fayette County Health Commissioner.
Yes.
You have been the statewide Health Commissioner, but you do not have those responsibilities in those other counties at this point. But it sounds as if you're trying to hint at some advice to the counties that have the local option, that they ought to be aggressive on this.
I think they ought to, I'll be right up front, I think they ought to implement it. I certainly understand religious beliefs, conservative beliefs, and a lot of other beliefs, and those have to be dealt with because everybody lives in the county. But our city government, after hearing a presentation from us and getting some information, voted it up. Now, Lexington isn't the same as every other county in the state, but this is a preventive thing. It's like giving diphtheria shots to keep diphtheria disease out. It's not exactly an immunization, but it stops the transmission. And that's the public health piece of it.
Curiously, how will you, get word out about this once you have?
Well, you're helping me right now for anybody that watches this, and we're going to use our social media, which has quite an active role in our health department. We have talked to these folks at the jail. They told us places we ought to hand out brochures. They told us a little business card size thing with information on it is much better than some newspaper ad. They told us places to go. Apparently down there where the buses change passengers on Vine Street, in that area, there are a lot of people coming and going because that's how they get around. One thing they told us is, guys, run your program during the day because we don't go out at night. The bad guys are out at night.
Do you find when you're talking to people who are in the grips of addiction that they are seeking a way out?
I'm limited to 8 people, 4 men, 4 women, county jail last month. But every one of them wanted to find a way to stop. Some of them, a lot of them said we're going to try when we get out of here to stay clean. But one lady told me it's hard to do. I live with a dealer. There's a lot more to this than is generally known, and I've worked in public health for 50 years, and I've been around this stuff. But spending an hour with one group of men and another hour with a group of women really was an eye-opener. I mean, one guy's sister is selling sex to make money for her habit. One guy said he'd lost everything except the sandals on his feet trying to pay for his habit. You shouldn't get into this, but people have got to realize 2 or 3 doses of this stuff, and it doesn't matter what your spiritual or religious or anything else beliefs are. That stuff has got you. It's just got you, and we got to get them off and then find ways to keep them from getting back on, and that's the challenge, keeping them from getting back on it.
50 years in public health, is it the worst situation now in all of those years?
It's different. I had cancer. I think I told you the last time you talked to me. Man, having that lymphoma treated in 2015 is very different from what it was like in 1971. But we're obese and we're shooting each other in the streets much more. We used to have people with mental illness have a place they could go and live in a safe fashion. We decided not to do that. There's an upside to that, but there's a downside to that, especially the ones that don't take their medicine. We had one in our building this week. Guy had run out of medicine, wasn't causing trouble exactly, but he was worrying everybody, so we arranged to get him sent to someplace where he could get his medicine. Those things are more difficult than they were.
Dr. Rice Leach is with us. He's the Fayette County Public Health Commissioner. We're going to talk about, there's sort of a new report card about health in the region. Talk about that in this report as well, that it is difficult to get people qualified for the military these days due to obesity and other problems. Kentucky Newsmakers coming back later. David O'Neill talks about why your home is worth what it is on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back in. It's great to have you with us here on WKYT for Kentucky Newsmakers. We're continuing our visit with the Fayette County Public Health Commissioner, Dr. Rice Leach, who has also served as the statewide health commissioner here in Kentucky. Lexington with a bit of information about its own health, its public health concerns. Right now, what areas of improvement do we find?
Well, there's a group in the University of Wisconsin, I think, funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, that looks at 3,600 counties and measures their health status against about 24 variables. And remarkably, Kentucky is not that far off the national average for obesity. Now, the national average is not in very good shape. But things like children living in single-family homes and sexually transmitted diseases and things like that are where we are considerably worse than the national average. Now, here in the state, Lexington's number 6. I think Oldham or someplace like that's or Woodford, those two are number 1, but guess what? That's where the money is. But nationally, you know, we are a world-class city, and we need to work on some of these other things to get the health thing up there.
Well, there were some military folks who came in as a part of a presentation about obesity and the fact that there is some difficulty in qualifying people to be soldiers these days because of the obesity epidemic, the inability to meet fitness standards. Right. Your thoughts on that? How do we
It's a fact. It's a fact. 1985, about 15% of the country was obese. There are places now where it's 45 and 50%. That's 30 years. 30 years ago, people were built more like you and I are built. It's different. If you go to the Centers for Disease Control website and look up obesity and look at the map, you can just see the rise in obesity. It looks like a conquering army going through a country with no resistance. It's unbelievable, and you can't move right when you got all that weight. First of all, you can't move right. Second of all, you're heavy. Second of all, you don't fit in tight places. It's bad for your knees. Over a lifetime, it gets your heart, contributes to diabetes. There's nothing good about it. And I'm not really sure how we turn that around, except that when I was little in this town, basketball goals were being used. Here today, an awful lot of them seem to be worshipped. They're out there, but nobody's shooting them. Most of the people I see riding bicycles are homeless men going to the Hope Center or around town where they don't have a car. Man, we rode bikes everywhere and we walked everywhere. Now, life is different. There's no getting around that. But to get at it, it's got to be exercise and diet. And then there are places in the country that are promoting changing what's available to eat. Do you legislate that? Well, that's kind of a tough one. But if you keep eating the same stuff, you're going to get big and heavy, and it's going to get in the way of having a agile police force, agile fire departments. Take a look at some of the emergency responders. Take a look at the photographs or your videos of guys going to a scene, and they're big. I passed out once at UK Stadium because I had an infected tooth. The dentist prescribed Tylenol 3 with a touch of codeine. I had a big old Polish hot dog and a half gallon of Coke and fainted. The guys that came to get me from the fire department were huffing and puffing, and they wanted to put me on that little plastic baby, and I said, you wait, I'll walk out under my steam. But all of that stuff gets in the way of us being a successful society, and it's physiologically, it's easy to change. Sociologically, hey, whole different ballgame.
Another couple of minutes for us here. You're another area of responsibility for the health department is restaurant inspections,
Yes,
and
yes.
people are very interested in those, and you do those regularly. Quickly, about a minute left. Does anything on that change in the summertime as a result of more outdoor eating?
I gotta claim ignorance. I don't know whether it changes in the restaurants or not. But what I do know is, in addition to restaurants, we inspect jails and swimming pools and trailer parks, and I had a whole list of these things. That we're all over the schools. We tattoo parlors. We inspect all kinds of things, we're like Kentucky Utilities. The power is on. Nobody knows what they're doing, but let the power go off for 6 hours or 2 days or the ice storm, and everybody knows what's going on. That's our job. Keep it up and running so you can go to work, come here and do your television show, and go to school.
Dr. Leach, thank you as always. We appreciate it. Hope you'll stay with us. Fayette County's PVA, David O'Neill, coming next on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Do you ever wonder how your property tax is figured, or why the sale of a home down the street can affect the value of your house? Fayette County's Property Valuation Administrator is David O'Neill. We're going to ask him how the PVAs set values, who is eligible for a homestead exemption that lowers your tax bills, what's likely to cause your property value to go up or down. Mr. O'Neill, thank you for coming in. Appreciate it very much. We'll learn some things this morning.
Good morning.
And a couple of fun questions first. What is the most expensive property in Fayette County?
Well, collectively, the most expensive property is Fayette Mall. We also had a sale at Hamburg last year for $187 million, which was the largest real estate transaction in Kentucky history. So those two parcels of property, or collections of parcels of property, are the most valuable.
And what's the total amount of property in Fayette County in terms of the value?
In terms of value, it's just shy of $24 billion. I thought we were going to hit $24 billion on this year's tax roll, but we fell a little short.
And that's how many parcels?
110,000, and that's everything commercial, residential, exempt, farms.
How do you determine property values?
Property values, for the most part, on residential property anyway, is based on sales of comparable properties in your neighborhood. So we will study sales over an 18-month or 24-month period, and then take what we learn and apply those in what we refer to as mass assessing across an entire neighborhood.
Is that frustrating to somebody maybe down the street who, you know, all of a sudden their property tax goes up because somebody got a good price for a home?
It can be, and we have some neighborhoods like that where you've got some families that have been there for many years, for 50 or 60 years, and then younger couples come in and flip houses and that type of thing, and it can change the values in ththose neighborhoods in a fairly short period of time.
There really is a movement across the country, and here in Lexington, though, to do that, right?
Well, there's a kind of a movement. It's a generational thing. It's Generation Y, so to speak. That what they value most is walkability and living in an idea of a community, and they want diversity in a neighborhood. They don't necessarily want to live in the suburbs, and they will trade off square footage for some of those other things, and that can change the makeup of a neighborhood.
They talk about some gentrification, where, as you say, the older residents maybe who have done nothing to their home but have seen homes nearby be substantially improved, and then their tax bill goes up.
That's right, and I hear from those folks.
I'm sure you do. What is your goal in assessing property?
Well, the Constitution says 100% fair cash value every year. So it's what the property would bring, and an arm's length transaction. That's a willing seller and a willing buyer exposed to the market for some period of time. Are
people notified that their property is being assessed? Do you knock on the door and say, we need to take a look at something? I try to be proactive and put out on the website the neighborhoods that we're visiting. We've got the county divided up into a quadrennial plan. So we have 300 roughly residential neighborhoods, and we do a fourth of those every year. So right now we're out visiting several neighborhoods. We'll visit 25 to 30,000
homes this year, and then we place value as of January 1st. And then if any of those values change from one year to the next, I'll notify the property owners by mail around April the 15th.
How substantial a change does it take for you to change the value of the home? I mean, if somebody adds on a carport, or if they put in a pool, or if they paint the house, I mean, which of those factors would change the value?
Well, we do follow up on building permits. We get building permits from the city. We pick those up every week, and we follow up on nearly all of them. We don't do things like privacy fences and repairing sidewalks, but if we think that it does add value to the home, then we will follow up and make an adjustment in an assessment.
We talked about what causes property values to go up in a neighborhood. What causes them to decline sometimes?
Well, we were in a recession for a number of years, from 2008 until the pendulum started to swing back the other way around 2012, and there were quite a few neighborhoods where we did some adjustments downward, and very few neighborhoods where I was doing adjustments upward.
There's been some controversy about the use of something called pictometry, I think it is, where you're using that technology to do what?
Pictometry is a fantastic technology that we all should be embracing, and what it is aerial photography, both directly over the property and also allows for a 360-degree view around a property, and it's fairly high definition, low altitude. It's flown every 3 or 4 years depending on what type of a contractual arrangement the local jurisdiction has with the pictometry company. Really, I believe that it's only a controversy because there were some people who were not happy with their assessments in another county, and so the pictometry got brought into the conversation. But actually, it's a technology that we use quite a bit.
That you can better see the property with it.
We can better see the property. We can be more efficient. We can be more timely. In Fayette County, it doesn't take the place of actually going out and looking at the property. We're required by law, by statute, to physically inspect every parcel once every 4 years. We do that, and we don't substitute pictometry for that. But if we have other questions, if we need to verify something, we will pull it up on our computer and take a look at the photograph rather than sending somebody out to make another visit.
Mr. O'Neill, if somebody disagrees with the assessment, it has gone up too much, or they just, for some reason, they don't like what has happened, do they have a recourse?
Of course, yes. The fair and equitable is what we shoot for, and if you don't believe it is fair and equitable, give us a call. There's a period of time set aside by statute every year where any property owner can conference with their PVA. It's the first Monday in May. It runs for 13 consecutive days, including Saturdays. And then coming out of that protest period, if either party is still not satisfied, then it can be appealed to the local Board of Tax Appeals. So if you, speaking just for Fayette County at this point, if you don't believe your assessment's fair or equitable, give us a call and we'll flag the property for review for 2016. The 2015 tax roll is now nailed down. There's nothing I can do about that, but we can look at it for next year.
You make a good reference there too, the fact that Fayette County only, and but you speak with the PVAs across the state. There's a lot of shared information, isn't there?
There is. We have a solid PVA association. We have a couple of conferences every year. One of them the Department of Revenue puts on, and the PVA Association does the other one, so we stay in close contact.
And sometimes there's envy, and sometimes you feel sorry for each other, I'm sure, with some of the issues, right? What do you do about, I mean, here in Lexington, for instance, the Center Point block, where there were buildings that were then reduced to a lot. There was a plan to build this elaborate development that has not come about to this point. Now a pit dug out. I mean, how do you assess the changing value there?
Well, the Center Point has been an interesting, and it's been a tough parcel to reassess, and right now it sort of is a parcel, but it's evolved into that. When I first became PVA in March 2009, it was still 17 individual parcels. The buildings had been demoed at that point, but the individual parcels of land in that block, there were still 17 of them, each of them having their own value. And then over time, it got consolidated down into 2 parcels, and then it got consolidated down into 1. And so now there's 1 parcel, but there are also these air lots with the parking garage supposedly going on one and the various buildings on other air lots. So it has been a very complicated.
Well, is it worth more or less now than it was a few years ago?
It's worth more. So we reassessed it for $12 million for 2015.
And if the project
it had been $8 million previously.
So if the project does take off, then the value would continue to increase, you would think, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have a robust website called FayettePVA.com, and most of the counties, again, you have a website out there to look at, but yours has a lot of detail, a lot of information, and people use it in a lot of different ways.
They do, and I hear every day some different way people use it. They tell me they use it to address their Christmas cards and all kinds of things, but it's
or just to be nosy,
just
right?
to be nosy, of course. But it's a very popular website. We have about 30,000 unique visitors, and there's only 90,000 houses in Fayette County. So people, they get on there and they really get addicted to it and love to look up property. So, but you can look up every property in the county, commercial or residential, see the sales history, the valuation history, see photographs. You can get to various interactive mapping capabilities. You can see the pictometry aerial photography I was telling you about.
Any issues facing property assessors for the legislative session that is coming up?
Well, PVAs are always underfunded, you know, like a lot of government agencies are. But with other county offices, like the sheriff and the county clerk, they're a fee-driven office. So there's a fee attached to serving court papers or to renew your car tags, and there's nothing like that for PVAs. So every year or every 2 years, we have to go back and basically start with a zero-based budget and ask for funding. And so we need a permanent funding mechanism. So that would probably be the primary one.
I promised I'd ask about the homestead exemption, what that is, who qualifies.
Most states have some type of a homestead exemption. In Kentucky, it's for folks who are 65 years of age or older, and in many cases, if you're disabled, you qualify for it too. And it's a set dollar amount that's taken off of the taxable value of your property. So it's $36,900 for this year.
All right. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks
Appreciate
for
it very
having me.
much. All right. David O'Neill is the Fayette County Property Valuation Administrator. Thank you for joining us for this edition of WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. I'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning. We start at 4:30, so we're up when you're up, and we hope you make it a good week ahead.